This is the bonus section podcast, episode number 101, how to pick the key self-improvement subjects to read about. Are you feeling like there's something greater inside of you just waiting to break through? Well, hey, you are not alone. I'm on a never-ending journey to unlock my full potential and live the most fulfilling life possible. And I want to bring you along with me and share what I'm learning. Hey there, I'm Danny Griffin, the host of the Bonus Section podcast. And in each episode, I share insights and tips to help you take immediate action to move towards your own goals. We also leave the notes from each episode at freethinkingtools.com. So head over there and you can get a copy, give you something to work with when you're trying to really work on yourself. All right, let's get started. How to pick the key self-improvement subjects to read about. Now, this is interesting how this happened, okay? I was listening to YouTube, and I always am interested in self-improvement conversations. And so there's a guy right now that's pretty prolific. His name is Patrick Bet-David, and he is doing a great job out there of really spreading a positive message. And, you know, again, he might not appeal to everybody because he's a little bit more aggressive, and I think his crowd is more very, it's the competitive crowd, right? Everybody that wants to get the edge and make money. I get it. I like that crowd. It's part of me, but it's not all of me. And I think that we have to strip it back a little bit and take some things in a little bit more slow motion. We don't need the high testosterone version of this for it to be effective for everybody. So it made me think, though, because he's talking about books. And if you're watching the podcast or you're watching this on YouTube, by the way, head over to YouTube and we're going to be doing a lot more over there. So that's actually now all moved under my my personal brand. So look for Danny Boy Griffin over there and you'll find me somewhere, right? So on the bookshelf behind me, I have a whole bunch of books. And so I started thinking, okay, he's talking about going to Amazon and looking at what books in self-improvement areas have high ratings and just start there and read it. It's good advice, right? It's good advice. Because if there's a conglomeration of interest in a subject, it's pretty good social validation that if there are a lot of 5-star ratings or high ratings for a book, it's probably a good place for you to start. So, but books are very important as part of this. I personally like the combination of the medium of a physical book, but I also listen to an enormous amount of audiobooks. And if there is something that I need to find in the public domain because I can't find it elsewhere, I'll go to YouTube and I'll listen to a whole book on YouTube. So you have to ask yourself, what medium do you prefer to learn from? But I'm talking about book mediums. Whether it could be a Kindle, so it's a digital book, whatever. I mean, you get the point, but it's a book. It's a book. And I think that matters because in a book, when somebody has dedicated their life to a subject and they have accumulated a lot of information and put it in a good order for you to consider, that's a great place to start. Because the challenge with the internet is you can get a lot of snippets. I mean, especially in the day and age of shorts, right? It's very difficult. I have a whole list of shorts that I want to do about this podcast so that I can have somebody listen to a more fully articulated version of the podcast if they like the teaser pieces that they hear, which is very tough in under 60 seconds to be fully articulate. It's enough to be provocative and get somebody to take the next step. But when you want to get serious about a subject, you need a book. You need to get into a book and you need to really look at the pieces and the components of that book to do what? To provoke you to think. I mean, that's the most important part of a book, is that it provokes you to think beyond what you already know, to challenge your perceptions. So I think that medium is really important. But so what do you do though when you're trying to figure out which ones about self-improvement? Where do you start? What's the subject? So, you know, we live in this world of keywords. So I started thinking to myself, what's the best advice I could share on what worked for me? And I don't have to really look too far because on the shelf behind me, it breaks down into two major areas. I mean, I would tell you mindset is number one. You can see this first batch of books. It's all about mindset, and that's really important stuff. So I'll get into that in a second, but what matters to you most? I mean, if you're sitting in here and you're having a crisis about a subject, or, you know, angst about not achieving a goal, and you could be younger listening to this. I mean, I have 5 kids and I know the angst that they go through as they all, 2 of them are past college, but the others are either in the thick of it and one more to go, making that decision about what school to go to, what city do they want to be in, and then most importantly, what do they want to do with their lives? That's the subject that always weighs on so many of us. And if you're older and you feel like your life has slipped away and you feel like it's getting away from you and, oh, it's too late. No, it's not. No, it's not. It's never too late to pursue what matters most to you. So you just have to pick that subject and have that subject in front of you. And if you're young and you're not quite sure what you really want or where you're really at and all of that, well, then what I would say to you is I would take a look at a variety of subjects that you think are interesting to you and put them out in front of you. And again, the best way to deal with all this, get it out of your head, through your arm and down onto a piece of paper. For those of you watching on the YouTube version or online, I always have my legal pad next to me and a pen so that I can capture those fireflies, as I like to talk about. When the synapses fire off and there's a shining of light, I want to get in there and I want to capture it. And I want to put it down on paper so that I remember it and I can sort it out that way. It's much better, right? So that's what matters most to you. So you're talking about books as a medium, so you know where you're going to go. But then you have to first sit down and say, what? A book about what? And so the actionable tips that I wanted to share with you today, as I was thinking about this, well, what are the subjects? Because Patrick Bet-David he was going through a variety of subjects, but started to think about, for me, what are those subjects? And the first one is most definitely about mindset and the psychology of mindset. One of the books behind me, The New Psycho-Cybernetics, by originally, and the body of work is done by Maxwell Maltz, but my marketing mentor, Dan Kennedy, bought the rights to it and he edited the version. So there's another nice version of that too. So it's really, it's a real good place to start because it was a real how-to for me. So that book really changed a lot of the way that I understood self-image management and the theater of the mind, that I could go in there and see myself acting as if I were doing certain things before they ever happened. So really like an athlete acting as if. So that was a really big one for me. And then there are another one that I think for me was just super influential was Influence by Robert Cialdini, because that gave me a reality of how mindset really works. I mean, we all love to think we're in full control of the way that we think and the way that we therefore act after we think. It's not true. There's a lot of psychological triggers and people react to those triggers. That book was just mind-blowingly important for me, especially as it relates to my business. And that's where Bet-David is talking about out improving people and what it will do. Right? I get what he means, because that's why it struck me. When I was thinking to myself, my gosh, he's just so right, because that book, for example, Influence, when I think about, and if you don't know my other context and how I make my living, I'm in the real estate business in a lot of different areas, but one is as a coach, and my obligation is to come up with a unique way of doing business to acquire listings. And so we have to come up with scripts, and those scripts have very specific words and offers are made of very specific steps. And all of that is stuff that I learned from reading books. So he's right. I just out-improve my competition. And at the moment, that's really working well. And it took a long time. It took a lot of books. It took me thinking a lot about how to apply it in the real world. But my goodness, I don't even know where I would be without having read those books and having that perspective. And that's just, I'm giving you a fraction of this because I don't want the podcast to be a forever thing. I wanted to provoke you to take some of the action steps that I took. Just become a consumer of books, however the easiest way for you is to do it. I don't want you to get intimidated because you go buy a book and you're not a physical reader. It's not your thing, whether physical, paperback, hardcover, or digital. I mean, that's actually the reading of a book, either one. It takes some time, but listen to them. I mean, my gosh, if you're more auditory, listen to them. Really, you can do it, and for hours in the car. I mean, I get into books that really provoke the mindset even deeper, that can take a long time, and are complicated books. I mean, I listened to Carl Jung's book recently, all about the conscious and the unconscious and symbols and what symbols mean. And it was fascinating. It was arduous, hard work. So I just turned it on in the car, and you're already in long drives. You're sort of in the zone, especially those of you that have a long commute. My gosh, gosh, what you can pick up and learn. I'm not going to remember everything from Carl Jung's book, but it sometimes just the simplest concepts too, like really thinking about the conscious mind and what that means. I mean, that all was really, really important to me, right? So all of those things are really critical to me. But other things besides mindset, as I get off of that, there are practical things too, like money. I mean, money is a subject that is mattered to me for a long time, and I've tried to learn a lot about money. Not about making it, but once you have it, what is it really doing to you, and what does it mean to you, and it has a lot of psychological factors. So it's interesting because I just listened to The Psychology of Money on Audible, and so that tied into my desire to learn more psychologically. I mean, I know pretty well some of the basics of money, and I know that I'll get into this in a second. I won't spoil one of my other key subjects, but money is something you want to learn about. Don't just sit there and blindly put your money into 401k programs or whatever retirement programs, or just give it to a money manager and not know why you're doing that and what you're doing that and defining the expectations. So that there are a lot of basics that you can read about money. And my gosh, if you want to learn about money, I would highly recommend you read anything by Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. I mean, just talk about people who understood the power of patience combined with the pursuit of returns on investment. It's just so stupid simple. Read that kind of stuff. Read Bogle's books about money. Bogle has since passed, but he's the founder of Vanguard and low-cost index funds. Learn, there are myriad books about investing in real estate, but real estate investment ultimately it's a wonderful forced savings account, because you, if it's your principal residence, are paying down the principal over time. You're building equity, and clearly going to the next level with investment property. I mean, just wonderful books on how money works and to help you achieve financial goals. And that's really led me to the third subject here that I think is critical for out improving your older self, really is the best way to say it, is goals. Brian Tracy spent an entire career writing pretty much about the same thing in a lot of different angles about goals and how critical they are. And I think it was in his book somewhere where he referenced, and it's a little bit of a complicated term when I looked it up, but teleological. That he referenced that we are, as humans, teleological or goal-seeking organisms, meaning that's the way we are. I mean, you think about the survival mechanism, survival of the fittest. I mean, goals to survive. I mean, we've lost track of that because we live in such a comfortable society. If you lose your job, government's going to be right there to give you at least enough money to put food on the table. So we lose that drive sometimes to go pursue those goals because we do feel like there's a safety net. And we have this weird thing in our brain for survival. We can set the thermostat on just barely. Like most of us can find a way to set it on just barely. We're always, up against it with money. That's why I said mindset, money, and goals. Because if your goal is to just kind of meander along and just make it, that's a tough way to live. And no wonder why there's so much anxiety and angst. So really writing down clear goals on how to outpace the basics of what you need. I mean, just think about that from a perspective. That's really important. And that's why it's really important to set that financial goal. What do I need to outpace in a comfortable margin, which would include if things go wrong for me? How do I outpace the basics of what I need for money to put food on the table, to put a roof over my head, to get transportation, to buy clothing, the basics. Yeah, the basics. Pay attention to that stuff first and then set the goals to be a premium to that you want to get beyond that. And I'm not saying so you can go consume more. It's always about more, bigger, more. I couldn't wait to downsize my house, to tell you the truth, that I did last 3 years, 3 years ago. I couldn't wait to downsize it. So goals, I'm not talking about more. I'm talking about better. What's better for you? What's better? And write that down. And how could you get to better from where you are today to where you'd like to be? That's better. And that's a really good reason to write a goal, but you need to learn more about goal setting. There are all sorts of ways. Ironically, Brian Tracy's book many years ago, that was like the yellow pad idea was to write down all of the goals that you had one day, go to sleep on it, and then wake up the next day and don't even look at it, write them down again. And so there was a technique in there that Brian gave on how to clarify what goals are actually most important. So you see what I mean? So goals. But then, all right, so mindset, money, goals. I'm reading books. I'm listening to books. But why doesn't always it seem like there's progress? Because to judge how this is all working in self-improvement and out-improving yourself or the competition, if that's what you want, there's something missing. And so it's a subject that I probably am going to dive into after writing this podcast and this and doing this video is discipline. So I just finished a book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. So I study also, one of my subjects is just studying success. And Napoleon Hill was a writer in the early 1900s who had incredible access to some of the most successful people of his time, set up by primarily Andrew Carnegie. And he just studied some amazing people. And he wrote a book called The Law of Success, which is biblically thick. I mean, it's massive. And then he did what is essentially a summary of that in Think and Grow Rich. But he had these other works too as time went on. And ironically, because he was tackling some tough subjects and outwitting the devil, his family sat on it for a long time before it got produced. I mean, I can't remember what they said. Maybe it was written in the 1950s. I can't remember. You can look it up. But they didn't release it until 2000s, early 2000s. And it was just really striking for me. There's a battle that goes on in your head, and it is what causes you to lack discipline to pursue these things. It's just so easy that battle that goes on in your head to procrastinate and to do really dumb things and non-productive things and sometimes downright ugly things. There's a battle for it. And in his context, it's the devil. And he does this unbelievable interview with the devil. And it just really hit me that, if people could be more conscious that there's this battle going on for them, and you don't have to put it in a religious context, but there's a battle going on for you. And it's one that wants to pull you away from achieving worthy goals, and there's another that wants to pull you towards it. So you give it whatever context you want. For me, devil works just fine because I know he's real. And so when I look at that, it's discipline. Is it the discipline to think correctly, to behave correctly? Yes, it is. And I get that context from a book, right? So for me, what works for me is that kind of religious context where it's God or the devil trying to fight for me, one to pull me completely off. I mean, look at, you know how easy it is for the devil to get up in my head and say, oh, you don't need to produce all that content. I mean, you're not making any money from it. I know. It's my giveaway stuff. It's my legacy stuff. It's how to live authentically beyond the money, beyond all of, whatever I achieve. It's to leave people better than I found them. That's a huge calling for me, and it matters. And I want to be able to get to the end of the road, and I want to be able to say, I did it. I did the best that I could to have a positive influence on people in any way that I could. And I continued to get better. I improved myself at that. And that's, you see how it all starts to tie together? And again, this is just my experience. And I hope by being transparent with my experience, I can help you be encouraged to use the same tools that I do. So it starts with books. But the secret ingredient, again, from another book that I'm reading right now, it's called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And I think that's the secret ingredient. Grit, in her case, she combines passion and perseverance. I'm going to stick to the perseverance piece for a minute. That you need the perseverance to get back on course when you fall off. And there's nothing better than jumping right back into one of these books, maybe re-listening or rereading one all over again. That will really help you. Okay, so let me go back and summarize it. Thank you to Patrick Bet David for inspiring me to think about this in a very little short that I listened to. It was the term out-improve that hooked me. But I came up with the subject, how to pick the key self-improvement subjects to read about. And the first thing is, I think you first want to discuss with yourself when you're talking about reading, because it's a loose term these days, what medium do you prefer to learn from? So is it a digital book? Is it a physical book? Is it an audio book? Think about that. What are you most likely to consume? Start there so you don't get turned off by the exercise from the beginning. Also, second point, ask. What matters to you the most? So before you pick a subject for you, what matters to you the most? What are you thinking about? And it might be, thank you, Carl Jung, it might be in the unconscious mind that you have to bring to the conscious mind, and just name that subject. You might be struggling with something that's very, very particular to you, whether it be schools, geography, companies, whatever. Those are specific things. And then the actionable tip for you is that there are universal subjects that will help you with any of those big matters in your life. 1 is mindset. 2 is money. 3 is goals or goal setting. And 4 is discipline. But of course, the 4th point is that there is a secret ingredient, and you'll need perseverance to get back on course when you fall off. Let me summarize it by saying it this way. I heard Patrick Bet-David talking about out-improving the competition, and it made me think about how to help you do that. So first of all, you don't have to look at out-improving as a competition against somebody else. It's fine in that context, but more importantly, as a competition against whatever is keeping you from achieving your personal goals. So if out-improving matters to you, then I would suggest that there are several core topics you should study on whatever medium you prefer, as long as they are fully articulated books. That's my first recommendation. You can always go to the smaller bits, but start with fully articulated books by people who have really spent some significant time creating those. And I like Patrick's advice. You can go look at the reviews on Amazon. You'll know. Although I had a tough time putting these in exact order, what worked for me was, and is studying still, goals and why humans need them, mindset technology, mindset psychology, he said, money and how it works, and discipline. But lastly, it's inevitable that you fall off your journey, at some point. So the secret is to study perseverance so you can get back in the saddle easily. Okay. All right. So there you have it. Listen, appreciate you listening. And of course, you can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Spotify or your favorite platform. I'm sure we syndicate to many others. But most importantly, we're doing more and more on YouTube. So if you would go to my channel and you would subscribe, you can find me, Danny Boy Griffin. I'm over there. That would be greatly appreciated, because I'm trying to get this word of self-improvement, self-help, and just encouragement, motivation, whatever you take from it. I'm trying to get it to a bigger audience, and I'd appreciate your help in doing that. Remember this, though. Nobody's coming for you. Nobody. So go get to work on yourself and a better plan for your goals. And we'll see you in the next episode to help you do just that. Thanks.